In 2025, the United States did something few thought they would ever see again. American forces moved into Venezuela. They captured a sitting president, and then, almost casually, the White House said it would run the country. This is where the story breaks, because for years, you were told America first meant retreat, less intervention, fewer wars, a nation finally turning inward. But reality tells a different story. Bombs in the Middle East, forces stretched across Europe and Asia, and now, a return to raw power politics in America's own backyard. This is not isolation. This is something older and far more dangerous. If you care about where American power is heading and what it means for the rest of the world, stay with me, because what looks like strength may actually be strategic confusion. And once you see the pattern, you won't be able to unsee it. This moment did not appear out of nowhere. To understand it, we need to step back and name the problem clearly. At the center of this story is a contradiction that can no longer be ignored. Donald Trump returned to power on a promise of restraint. America first, less global entanglement, an end to what many Americans saw as wasteful foreign adventures. And that promise resonated. Globalization had hollowed out communities. Automation erased jobs. Immigration and trade became symbols of loss, not opportunity. After decades of wars that delivered little stability, the public wanted an inward turn. But here is the problem. While the rhetoric pointed inward, policy moved outward. Troops stayed deployed. Strikes continued. And the United States did not retreat from the world, it asserted itself more bluntly. What you are witnessing is not a strategy of withdrawal, but a collision between nostalgia and reality. A desire to revive an older version of American power, without accepting the limits of the modern world. That tension between what America wants to be and what it is forced to do drives everything that follows. To see why this contradiction was inevitable, we have to look backward, far backward into history. To understand what is happening now, you have to understand what Trump is trying to resurrect. Not the Cold War. Not even the post-World War II order. He is reaching back to the 19th century, a time when the United States believed security came from distance, from oceans, from dominance in its own hemisphere. The Monroe Doctrine, first articulated in 1823, was the foundation of that worldview. Keep rivals out of the Americas, and America would remain safe, prosperous, and free from foreign entanglements. Trump's 2025 national security strategy makes this explicit. It calls for enforcing the Monroe Doctrine once again, reasserting American preeminence in the Western Hemisphere, coercing neighbors to control migration, eliminating narco-terrorists, preventing hostile powers from owning key assets close to home. In theory, this was once a coherent strategy. In practice, it belongs to a different era, because the world that allowed hemispheric isolation no longer exists. Geography no longer guarantees safety. Missiles cross oceans. Cyber attacks ignore borders. Climate shocks do not respect hemispheres. Yet policy is being built on a memory rather than a reality. And when old doctrines collide with a new world, the result is not stability. It is crisis. That collision comes into full view with Venezuela. Venezuela was not just another operation. It was a rupture. When U.S. forces moved to capture Nicolás Maduro, the message was unmistakable. This was not diplomacy, not sanctions, not covert pressure. It was direct control. And when the White House declared that America would now run the country, it echoed something chillingly familiar. The language of 1898, when the United States seized Cuba, Puerto Rico, and distant territories, and crossed the invisible line from republic to empire. This was not about Venezuela alone. It was a signal to allies, to rivals, and to you, because an America that claims to reject intervention but intervenes anyway creates uncertainty everywhere. Rules blur. Intentions become opaque. Power feels unpredictable. Supporters see strength. Critics see recklessness. But both miss the deeper meaning. This was not a carefully designed strategy. It was improvisation born of frustration. A president who wants to disengage from the world yet cannot escape it, asserting control where resistance seems weakest. If this feels unsettling, it should. Because moments like this rarely stay contained. And if you want to understand why these actions keep repeating, even as they contradict stated goals, you need to look beneath the surface at the system itself. What you are seeing is not chaos. It is a system revealing its true logic. America First is not a strategy. It is a reaction to decline, to fatigue, to a public that no longer believes the old promises of globalization and endless leadership. But reactions do not replace structures. They collide with them. The United States still sits at the center of the global system it built. Its currency, its military, its trade routes, its alliances. You cannot simply walk away from that without consequences. So the system pulls back. When Washington tries to retreat globally, pressure concentrates locally. If it cannot dominate everywhere, it seeks to dominate somewhere, preferably close to home, preferably where escalation feels manageable. That is the hidden mechanism behind the revival of the Monroe Doctrine. Not confidence, but constraint. Not strength, but narrowing options. This is why neo-isolationist rhetoric produces neo-imperial behavior. Because a superpower that refuses to lead multilaterally does not become neutral, it becomes unilateral. And unilateral power, untethered from strategy, expresses itself through force. Once you see this mechanism, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. And it does not stop at Venezuela. The second crisis unfolds quietly, but its consequences are broader. While attention is fixed on Venezuela, the rest of the world is adjusting. Allies listen more carefully to what Washington does than to what it says, and what they hear is unsettling. The United States is not withdrawing. It is recalibrating pressure, bombing here, striking there, holding positions across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Iran, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, even the Caribbean and the Pacific. This is not escalation in one theater. It is friction everywhere. And here is the danger. When power is used frequently but strategically inconsistently, deterrence weakens. Adversaries test boundaries. Allies hedge their bets. Everyone prepares for surprise. The national security strategy reflects this confusion. It calls for pulling back while insisting on military dominance over Taiwan. It asks Europe to take responsibility while keeping tens of thousands of U.S. troops in place. It emphasizes diplomacy in the Middle East while reaffirming permanent strategic interests. Nothing fully ends. Nothing fully begins. This is a crisis of credibility, not capacity. America can still act, but no one is quite sure why or where the line is anymore. And when that uncertainty spreads, it doesn't stay abstract. It lands at home. Now let me bring this home, because this is where you enter the story. When strategy breaks down at the top, its costs do not stay in briefing rooms or war rooms. They show up in your life. You feel it when food prices rise because farm labor is missing. You feel it when construction slows because workers have been deported. You feel it when hospitality, care work, and services strain under shortages. The immigration crackdown was sold as strength, as control, but in reality, it disrupted labor markets and pushed prices higher, quietly taxing working families. The same illusion applies to tariffs. They were meant to protect you. Instead, they made everyday goods more expensive, while delivering only modest manufacturing gains. This is the human cost of strategic nostalgia. Policies designed for a world that no longer exists imposed on people who live firmly in the present. If any of this feels familiar, you're not alone. 2/3 of Americans now oppose these immigration policies. If this analysis helps you see the system more clearly, take a moment to engage. Share it. Stay with the conversation, because what happens next doesn't just shape foreign policy. It shapes your economic future. And the ripple effects don't stop at America's borders. What happens in Washington never stays in Washington, especially when power is this unsettled. Across the world, governments are recalculating, not because America is weak, but because it is unpredictable. In Europe, allies hear talk of annexation. Canada, Greenland, ideas that once belonged to the 19th century are now voiced aloud in the 21st. Even when they are not acted upon, they rattle trust. And trust, once shaken, is hard to rebuild. In Asia, continuity masks anxiety. The United States still pledges to deter conflict over Taiwan, still speaks the language of military overmatch. But partners quietly ask a deeper question. How long can a country that rejects leadership still be relied upon to lead? In the Middle East, nothing fundamental changes. Bases remain. Sea lanes stay open. Energy flows are protected. But the message is clear. America wants influence without responsibility, power without permanence. This is how vacuums form, not through withdrawal but through inconsistency. And when a superpower sends mixed signals, others move to fill the gaps. Slowly, cautiously, but decisively, the world is not waiting for America to make up its mind. And that brings us to the future where the stakes become unmistakable. Looking ahead, there are only 3 plausible paths forward. None of them allow a return to the past. The first is the optimistic scenario. America recognizes the mismatch between rhetoric and reality. It accepts that leadership in the 21st century cannot look like empire or isolation. Strategy becomes selective, disciplined, cooperative. Power is exercised with clarity, limits, and purpose. The gap between words and actions begins to close. The second is the middle path, the most likely one. Contradiction becomes normalized. America First remains a slogan, not a guide. Interventions continue, but without a unifying vision. Allies adapt. Rivals probe. The system limps forward, stable enough to endure but too incoherent to inspire. Then there is the darkest scenario. Rhetoric hardens. Imperial impulses escalate. An action against Canada, Greenland, or another ally triggers a fracture that cannot be repaired. The Atlantic Alliance collapses. The United States finds itself isolated not by choice, but by consequence. Here is the deeper truth. Grand strategies fail not when they are too ambitious, but when they are out of sync with reality. America does not yet know what it wants to be in this century. But the world will not pause while it decides. And that unresolved question brings us to the end and the beginning. The Trump era revealed something uncomfortable but essential. The United States no longer lacks power. It lacks alignment. America First was never fully about withdrawal. It was about escape from responsibility, from complexity, from a world that no longer bends easily to old rules. But escape is not a strategy. What you have seen from Venezuela to tariffs to immigration is a nation trying to solve 21st century problems with 19th century instincts. The result is drift, not collapse, but erosion. History is unforgiving to countries that confuse nostalgia with vision. Empires fall not when they stop acting, but when they act without coherence. If America is to lead again, it must answer a harder question than whether it wants power. It must decide how to use it without denying the world it actually inhabits. This story does not end here. It is still being written. And understanding it is the first step toward shaping what comes next. If this analysis gave you clarity, stay engaged. Share it. Subscribe for the next chapter. Because in an age of confusion, insight is not optional. It is power,